welcome to Radio Graham. 10 years ago, both sides of Aussie politics fought over whose onshore refugee prisons would be the harshest and therefore win the most racist votes. Today they're fighting over whose Devil's Island will be the cruelest. Why do they now prefer offshore child abuse?
Some 2,000 people gathered to demonstrate against the federal government's policy on asylum seekers. Many of those protesters had something in common, apart from their cause, obviously. They were local and they were first-timers, people who've been moved to action by the television images of Woomera.
Behind the razor wire, the demonstrations continued across the nation.
I think it's just the children behind razor wire. It's just not an Australian way to deal with people who are in trouble, particularly those who've done nothing.
Graham McAfee describes himself as a Canberra retiree who became so distressed and outraged by images of Australia's detention centres that he felt compelled to do something about it.
I'm not a member of any political party. I'm not a member of any action group, apart from the one that's been founded recently. I don't go to church. I'm not a member of any particular religion. I'm just a concerned Australian who knows the difference between right and wrong, as a lot do. This is not the same country that hosted the Olympics. Something has happened to Australia since the Olympics, and I don't like it. A lot of Australians don't like it, and we know where it comes from. It comes from a law that demonises and criminalises anybody who seeks asylum here, and that's wrong.
For Graham McAfee, it was time for radical action. Working out of a tiny home office, he outlined his idea on a web page. Then he bought a large newspaper advertisement.
This is the ad we put in the Canberra Times, which is asking people to consider going over to South Australia and actually rescuing the caged up children and bringing them back and seeing that they're properly cared for. It's the order of a couple of $1,000. But that's irrelevant. I mean, people are suffering. You don't worry about money.
The plan? To enlist 1,000 people to stage a mass break-in at the Woomera detention centre. The group would be called the Koala Convoy.
Well, the concept is to go there and bring out the refugees. It's quite simple. It's not like Pentridge. There's no stone walls. There's just some flimsy razor wire and some cyclone fencing, and that's it. So just go and get them. The idea would simply be to take them back to civilisation and ask people who have pre-arranged or pre-committed themselves to sponsor them or look after them, as normally happens now for those who are official refugees.
In terms of breaking into detention centres and liberating detainees and adopting them into the community, can you see why some people would see that idea as being slightly crazy?
Well, it's not unusual. I mean, if in my neighbourhood here, if somebody is keeping an Afghan hound, not an Afghan person, but an Afghan hound in cruel circumstances, the RSPCA person comes in, they extract the suffering dog first, and they have an elegant discussion with the owner later, but their first priority is to rescue the suffering animal. The RSPCA rescues the suffering animal first, then they deal with the owner later.
Tomorrow, there's people coming down from interstate from Sydney and Melbourne. There's like been thousands of people there, so okay. Good to see them.
The Koala Convoy idea was endorsed by a public meeting of the Refugee Action Committee, the group that organised a national rally outside Parliament House earlier this week. In the lead-up to the protest, organisers were out and about to boost numbers, but not everyone was supportive.
Well, we keep them better than criminals. We give them, you know, they're not. Well, what do they expect to gain?
These are innocent people.
The only reason I'm arguing with you is because they start the war as they finish, and we end up
That's
finishing.
absolutely untrue.
The day of the rally, and Graham McAfee is getting ready after first being undecided about whether to go.
I think it's good to protest and to speak out. But I think direct action is the answer when there is cruelty involved to children. You don't have protesting and having elegant policy discussions. There's no substitute for direct action.
Mr McAfee did turn up at the national rally, along with a number of other local people protesting for the first time.
We've just been really concerned about the sort of image that's been projected about what the rural people think, and there's a lot of groups here from different towns that have just started to start up. We've only been going for about 3 or 4 weeks, and we're just really concerned about what's happening. We want the government to know that there are people out there that might not have had a voice before, but we certainly have one now.
It's been 2 weeks since Graham McAfee placed the advertisement for the Koala Convoy. He received few pledges of support.
It's only a small number so far, and certainly well less than 1,000 required to be the trigger level. And there are similar committees in other cities forming, and they're perhaps better organised than we are in Canberra here. Melbourne, for instance, has a fleet of buses organised to do exactly the same thing, to go to Woomera.
With a federal election fought and won on this issue, is Graham McAfee really just tilting at windmills?
I don't have a crystal ball. All I can do is what I think is right, and all I can do is ask other people to do what they think is right.